Welcome to another segment of Food for Thought. I'm your host Mubashir Ahmed. In this program, we bring you information on everything that we use on a daily basis. We live in this earth and we require a lot of things on a day-to-day basis. Everything has an age limit, and after a certain time, everything turns into a waste. So we need to get rid of it. On the other hand, there are things that we use on a daily basis. For example, we buy fruits, vegetables, and those things also get consumed, and as a consumption, they also produce waste. So the waste, be it the wrapper of a gift that you just received, or be it the peel of a vegetable, or the fruit that you just consumed, it needs to be taken care of. And have you ever thought what happens to this waste? How much waste do you produce on a daily basis? What happens to the waste that we cannot reuse, and how much of it we do reuse? What is the effect of the unused waste on our environment? To talk about the waste, its management, and everything else related to it, and the environment as well, we have invited Gary Spotowski in our studios. Gary works with City of Edmonton's Waste Management Services as education program coordinator. Edmonton has the most advanced waste management network in North America and one of the best in the world. Gary, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Before we go into the details, tell us about yourself. How long have you been working with waste management, and your experience with waste management?
Well, it actually goes back to when I was a very small boy. The very first job I had, my father hired me to take the garbage out to the curb, so I think he gave
Like
me
all
a
of us
nickel,
do.
something like that, that's right. And then a long time ago, in the late 70s, I got a job as a garbage collector for the city of Edmonton. So I did that for about 3 years while I was putting myself through university. And that led to an interest in it, to tell you the truth, because at that time, everything was thrown out and everything was landfilled. It didn't matter what you put out. I just took it, put it in my truck, and landfilled it. And I thought something was a little bit wrong about that, didn't feel right. Anyway, then later on in the late 80s, I got a job as a commercial waste auditor with the city. That means I informed businesses of how they could properly recycle the material they had.
Right.
I did that for about 5 years. And then that got me into the education area of waste management, and I've been educating people about recycling and eco stations and composting for quite a while now, almost 15 years.
So we all produce waste. So what is exactly the waste management? I mean, it's not something like you manage a company, but manage the waste?
Sure. Waste is something that people really don't think of, or they didn't before. They do more now, and they sort of
Yes.
throw it out. But that's not a very responsible way to approach it. And so when we think of waste management, we want to manage that waste in a way that's very responsible on behalf of society and on behalf of the generations who are coming after in our lives,
Yep.
and on part of the environment as well, to do the right thing.
So it's basically taking care of the waste in a responsible way is basically the waste management.
That's right.
So when and how did Edmonton come up with the waste management idea that they're using today?
Well, it started in the mid-1980s. We needed a new landfill. And nobody wanted a new landfill anywhere near their houses or their town or whatever. And so that was a very intense search with a really high profile in all the media, etc. And people said, we don't want a landfill, but they also said we want to do something more responsible with the waste. We want to start recycling our waste. We want to divert waste from landfill. And that gave us the initial push. And so we started a recycling program in 1988, one of the first large-scale recycling programs in the entire country. And that was the first step in our march towards more responsible waste management.
So you say that it started with collecting the garbage from people's homes and then bringing it to a facility and all that stuff. That is something that happens, I think, in a number of cities in the world, in almost all the modern cities. What makes Edmonton's waste management program so special?
Basically, the amount of waste that we divert and the good job that Edmontonians do in participating in our waste management programs. For example, we can recycle, and that's very important, and you're right, many cities do recycle things like newspaper and tin cans and so on. That's very common now. It wasn't common back then, but it's common now. But then we also paid attention to the organic portion of the waste stream, which is really, really big. There's a lot more grass and yard waste and food waste and things like that that can be composted. That's roughly maybe 40% or 50% of the total waste stream, whereas we can only recycle, say, about 20% of the waste stream. So we got a large-scale composting facility, one of the largest in North America, to actually compost all of the organic material. So by recycling and composting, we're diverting 60% of the waste stream. But we don't stop there. There's still a whole bunch of stuff that we can't compost and can't recycle. Many, many things. Things like this shirt, if it wore it out, just for one example. And so we're now building a large waste to biofuels facility where we will take that waste that we can't compost, can't recycle it, and we will turn it into ethanol, and that can then be used for transportation purposes, heating purposes, all kinds of things. And we'll be diverting roughly 90% of the waste stream.
So that pretty much means the shirt I'm wearing today, tomorrow I might be using it in my car as a fuel?
That's correct. Isn't that something?
It is
Your
very
tie, this
interesting.
chair, the table, so many things.
Everything could go in there.
Anything could go in there, that's right.
So
yeah.
what would be the percentage of the waste that is recycled today in Edmonton? You say about 90, 95% of the waste is?
Diverted, the total amount diverted.
Okay.
We will recycle, we currently recycle about 20%, and then we compost another 40%, and then we'll take the other stuff and turn it into biofuels, into methanol or ethanol, and that will make up 90%.
So can we recycle everything, or we have certain limitations? For example, you talked about some of the things. What is it that we cannot recycle, and what is it that we can recycle in general terms?
I think it's easier to say what you can recycle easily. And basically what that boils down to is things that are flowing through your home very, very regularly and very fast, and they have a certain similarity to each other. For example, if we recycle newspaper. Newspaper is very common. It's becoming less common now, but newspaper is very common. It flows through your home very quickly. Magazines is another one. Pizza boxes, cardboard boxes, that type of thing. Cardboard tubes.
Yeah.
More cardboard boxes.
Absolutely.
Drink containers, you're drinking them very quickly. You can recycle them very fast. Milk cartons, that type of thing. Tin cans.
Yeah.
Basically, stuff that we consume very quickly, and we have that packaging that can be recycled, and we can separate it out from the waste stream relatively easily. That makes up the kind of stuff we can recycle economically and safely.
So does the recycling mean that whatever we have used, we will end up reusing it, or after some certain processing, it still goes into some sort of landfill or some sort of other facilities?
It depends on the material. For example, if you take your newspaper, again, that can be turned into a new newspaper, no problem. It can go to the mill, become pulped, and then that pulp becomes new newsprint, and the newspaper can be printed on that newsprint. That can go around and around many, many times. But sometimes newspaper in Edmonton, for example, also becomes something called blown cellulose insulation. And that means it turns into kind of small little particles, like a kind of fluff.
Yep.
And then they blow it inside attics inside houses, so that your heat doesn't escape as an insulation. That material probably can't be recycled again. It could be composted in the long run when the house is torn down and so on and so forth, but it can't be recycled again. There are other instances like that. Many plastic bags and plastic items become plastic lumber, and I'm not aware if plastic lumber can be easily recycled after it becomes plastic lumber. So some things can go around again and again and again, and some things can't.
Until a certain age, until a certain time when they cannot be further recycled.
That's right.
So this whole process starts with collecting the garbage from people's homes or offices or all those places, and then it goes to a certain facility. So walk our viewers through this whole process. What happens when this truck goes into the facility and dumps the stuff over there? What do you do with it?
Well, everybody, for example, might put all their recyclables into a blue bag like this one, right? And when it's full, they put it out on the curb. The collector takes it with many, many other blue bags and takes it to a place called the Materials Recovery Facility. There's a whole bunch of machinery and a whole bunch of people who, through their various efforts, separates out everything into its category. Paper goes this way, plastic goes this way, glass goes that way, metals go another way. And it's too complicated a procedure for us to explain all the machinery here in this interview, but that's essentially it.
So there are a lot of machines and there are a lot of people working on this to separate all the materials, first of all.
That's right.
And once that is separate, how many different areas does this thing go into? Like organic, like compost and
well, now we're talking just
metals
about
and-
recycling right
Okay.
now. So, so when you put your materials like newspaper and tin cans and plastic containers into the blue bag, it goes to a certain building where people and machinery separate it all out into about 7 different categories.
7 different categories.
About that, yeah, that's right.
So use of all this machinery and the people, you know, who are doing all this labor basically,
Yeah,
costs a lot of money.
costs some money.
So this whole process, is it self-sustained or do Edmontonians have to pay for it? Like,
No, it's not entirely self-sustaining from the sale of materials. That can vary. The total cost is probably the sale of the materials makes up between 1/5 and 1/3 of the total cost of collecting and processing all of the material. People recycle for many good reasons, not just economic ones.
absolutely, yeah.
You create employment, you divert material from landfill, you conserve resources. They do it because it's the right thing to do. So it is a cost, and it gets money back from the sale of material, but doesn't get all that money back.
Because I come from a background where we have not seen this kind of waste management programs, and a lot of garbage and litter, unfortunately, is left on the streets. And that also creates a lot of problems, not only for the people, but also the place looks dirty and stuff.
Sure.
Today, if we
Yeah.
walk outside in Edmonton, we literally do not see a single piece of paper or anything on the street. So, I mean, that absolutely speaks to what you just mentioned.
Sure, it speaks to an ethic of Edmontonians, for example, that they want a clean, healthy city, and they don't want to litter, and they want to pick up litter when they see it, and sort of foster the correct behavior that to put stuff into a garbage can or into a recycling container. And that same sort of ethic around waste spills into the idea of recycling or composting and so on.
Okay. So, Gary, you mentioned that some of the stuff actually gets composted. It
Correct.
goes into your facility, and it gets separated, and then it goes through the whole process, and
Yep.
it gets turned into a compost. Walk our viewers through this whole process and the challenges that you have in producing that compost.
Sure. Well, so we'll take your things like your orange peels and carrot tops and grass clippings and so on. It goes into this large composting facility. And at that point, there's still lots of little pieces of non-compostable things in there, like pieces of your old coffee cup or some bits of plastic or bits of old clothing, like textiles, your old sweater, all kinds of little stuff. So first what we do is we mix all the material together with sewage biosolids that come from a wastewater treatment plant, because that's really compostable stuff as well. It's very, very good.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then it goes through a screening mechanism. It's kind of like a large barrel with holes in it. It goes round and round and round. And the stuff you want to screen out falls out of the holes, and the stuff you want to keep keeps on going. And so we take that stuff we want to keep, that we want to compost, and we put it into a large, there's this large room called an aeration hall there. It's very, very big. I think you mentioned it might be around the size of a couple soccer fields.
Well, that's what I saw on
Yeah.
one of your documentaries on YouTube.
Right.
It was really big.
It's huge. And I think it's the largest stainless steel room in all of North America. It's stainless steel on the walls because it's very
Wow.
moist. inside a composting facility, and the stainless steel doesn't corrode very easily. So they use it.
Must have cost a lot of money to build it
Cost
too.
a fair number of dollars. That's true. That's
Okay.
true. Anyway, so in this aeration hall, you've got 3 long aeration bays, and you can think of those as like looking a bit like a hockey rink, only twice as long.
Okay.
And think of a hockey rink twice as long, filled with composting material about 3 meters thick, really, really high. Okay, so that's where it sits to begin to compost, and microbes begin to eat the material and the air and create compost. Wonderful.
How long it sits there?
It can be there for about 2 weeks to a month. And what happens in that large facility, it's very similar to a compost heap you might have in your backyard. When you put material in there, it can settle down, and you need to kind of fluff it up with a kind of tool in order to allow air to get inside it, because the compost needs air. And so we have a tool that kind of stirs up the compost inside of these bays.
There's not a number of people sitting and
No,
doing
there's
it.
not a bunch of people with little forks. No, it's this long sort of thing with this kind of like trowel that goes in there and spins around and goes back and forth, and fluffs it all up. At the same time, you monitor the moisture content of it.
Temperature, I believe, another.
Pardon me?
Temperature, I believe, is another
Temperature
thing.
is also very important, yep. Now the temperature kind of changes with the composting material. When you compost something aerobically with oxygen, heat is produced. That happens very, very naturally. Bugs eat the material and it raises the temperature up. Then you get another set of bugs and that raises the temperature up some more. It goes up. And so in order for us to kill all the bad bugs in the compost, we have to make sure it gets to a temperature of 55 degrees Celsius for at least 3 days. That's very hot. Think
That's
about
very
that.
hot,
And that's
absolutely.
all, there's not like little people holding little matches underneath of it, you know. This is all happening totally organically.
Where I
It's
come
really
from, it
fascinating.
actually gets to 50, 52 degrees Celsius normally. So yeah, it's very hot here. I mean, normally we
That's
get
right.
about 20, 25 degrees.
Sure.
So absolutely. So this whole process takes almost a month and a half, it looks like.
Roughly about a month inside the composting facility. Then it has to go to an outside site where it matures for a little while, because the composting is still happening.
Okay.
So it just kind of, it takes another few months, and then it's totally ready to be sold to market.
That includes my shirt and stuff also?
Yes,
Partly.
things like your shirt would have gotten filtered
And
out.
turns into what?
Uh,
I see you have a bag here.
I do have a bag, yes. Here's the material that we do make called Second Nature compost. And this is actually made from wood chips and yard waste and sewage biosolids. And
But they all have to go through a similar process to turn into a compost.
they all go through the same process, that's correct. But with the stuff inside the large building, that often has little bits of plastic and things
Okay,
that have to be
okay.
filtered out. This stuff is a bit more pure in that
Okay.
sense. And you can use this anywhere, really.
It really
That's
is.
your old garbage. Isn't that amazing that that's
Yeah.
old garbage?
Absolutely.
Something beautiful like that.
Yeah. No. It's almost the soil.
It looks like soil,
It looks like soil.
but really it's meant to be a soil conditioner.
Conditioner.
That's right. It
That's
physically
what
alters the
my
soil.
next question going to be.
Go ahead.
What do we do with it? I mean, people buy it, they put it in their backyards, or
They can. They can buy Second Nature compost like this at garden stores, and they can put it into their gardens, or they can sprinkle it on top of their lawns, and it just helps everything. When you sprinkle it on top of the lawns, the nutrients inside the compost get brought up by the grass, and so it helps your lawn to grow very nicely. If you work it into your soil, it adds nutrients that your plants can take up very, very slowly. It's very good that way. But also it adjusts the composition of the soil to help plants grow. For example, we have lots of clay in our soils around here. If you add compost, it kind of breaks the clay apart very nicely. Or if you have lots of sandy soils, it binds it together. It's really miraculous, the stuff. It's very, very good.
it's just very interesting to see what we eat, what we use, what we wear. We can bring all of these things back in order to help the environment from where we produced it in the first place.
Yeah.
But definitely there are certain things that we could not turn into this kind of material. For example, if my television breaks.
Yep.
I would think, coming from that mentality where I come from, throw it in the garbage.
Yeah.
What do I do with that in Edmonton?
In Edmonton, you take it to an eco-station.
What is an eco-station?
An eco-station is a place that takes household hazardous waste. Here are some examples. I have some examples here of things that should go to an eco-station.
Yeah.
Light bulbs.
Light bulbs, yeah.
Large things like
Mattress,
mattresses. They're
yeah.
too heavy for the garbage man to lift up very safely, so that
Absolutely.
should go there. Batteries. Keep
Batteries.
that out of the compost. Hypodermic syringes that can poke a person. Don't want that in the garbage. Paint.
Paint, yeah, absolutely.
Paint thinner. Anything that has a little poisonous skull and crossbones on it should go
Yep.
to an eco-station. Here's your television set coming up. Things like appliances, like vacuum cleaners,
Yeah.
Christmas lights,
yeah.
drain cleaner,
Cleaner,
taps,
taps,
microwave,
yeah.
frying pan, motor oil,
Motor oil, yeah.
toasters, computers.
Basically, it's most of
And your
these things
television.
are, and my television.
There you go.
Most of these things are which are basically electronics,
Yep.
and they contain a lot of precious metals in them too.
Yes.
So, how does Edmonton Waste Management Center deal with that kind of material to reclaim those materials and I don't know, make money out of it or whatever?
Well, when first off, we want you to bring all those things like televisions and light bulbs and household hazardous waste to an eco-station so that they don't contaminate the compost that we make, right? That it's a very good idea to keep that out of the compost. That's one thing. So when you bring, you're a very good man, you bring your television or your toaster or whatever to an eco-station, then we have it. Your old computer, for example. So we gather all those things up at our eco-stations. We have 3 of them. There's one in the west end, one in south side, one in the far
is in the north,
southwest.
yeah.
And then we take all of those old computers and televisions and appliances and we bring them to a facility at the Waste Management Center where they actually take everything apart and reduce it down to all the things like silver and platinum and gold and so on and so forth, aluminum, steel,
So
plastics.
it's a whole process. It's not like somebody sitting there and separating everything out of it.
No, it's all done by machines. There are some men and women who do the initial work
Separation,
in
yeah.
separating and taking a television apart or a computer apart, for example. But after that, it's done mostly by machines.
I was watching in one of your educational programs where they were showing that there was a huge machine that was cutting down everything to dust, basically. Is that machine that is what is separating everything? Like it cuts down everything and then it was going through some magnetic field to pick all the metals out of it?
Yes, in Edmonton, we actually, it's quite a brutal thing. You'll actually put all these computers and television sets into something called a chain shredder.
Chain shredder.
A chain shredder. I
That's
don't know
what
if
it must
is
be.
that the machine?
Yeah.
This is a real mean machine. Like you'll take a chain, just a regular chain, but it's really big. Like each link will be about that big,
Right.
really huge.
Yeah.
And it spins around very, very fast inside of this steel cylinder. And it breaks and smashes all of this computer stuff apart. And then actually it does go along a line where people will take the circuit boards and put them in one place and they'll put the copper wiring in another place and so on and so forth. Then those circuit boards, for example, they'll go to a different facility in eastern Canada, which is a bit more sophisticated and will break things down even more into kind of a powder that will then be sort of powdered precious metals that are then separated by another facility in Belgium. It's very complicated, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite something.
But at the end, we end up reclaiming most of it.
Yes, absolutely. Totally.
What happens if we do not go through all of this process? I mean, if a person like me, for example, doesn't know about this eco-station, doesn't know about this whole process and just takes his TV and, looks around, nobody's watching, just drop it in this field here. What kind of damage this thing can cause to the environment if it is dropped in a field, for example, or if it ends up going into a landfill or if it ends up in somebody's backyard?
Well, let's say if it ends up in a landfill, things like televisions and computers can contain some fairly toxic materials. Things like lead and mercury are two of
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
worst ones. And so inside, if you take lots of them and put them inside a landfill, even though most modern landfills have a protective layer to keep any kind of material leaching down into the groundwater, for example, that might contain some of that lead or
Lead,
mercury,
yes.
uh, that's always a danger. You know, most landfills protect from that by having sophisticated systems to make sure everything's held inside of it, like a diaper, for example. You know, but there's always that chance you could contaminate the groundwater, and you don't want to do
And
that.
then you will end up drinking it actually from the same place. So you got to be careful about it.
That can be the same kind of
So it's
connection.
a moral
sure.
responsibility that we should take these things to the stations, the
Very much
designated
so.
places. So-
Sure, you know, society produces some stuff with some dangerous elements. We've got to handle that responsibly, so we should take it to an eco station.
So Gary, by acting on your advice, you know, we can save the environment. For example, the trees.
Sure.
What would you say? How much can we help?
Well, you know,
Can we put a number on it?
we can, you know, it's difficult to put an exact number on it, but, you know, very roughly speaking, people estimate that 1 ton of recycled paper might account for about 20 trees saved, thereabouts, roughly, give or take. And so if you use that as a figure, we are saving millions and millions of trees over time by recycling what we do.
So it's a huge facility that you work in, and there is sophisticated machinery in there, like you mentioned about that chain shredder or whatever it was. How do you keep your people safe?
Well, first off, we'll go back up and let's keep our collectors safe. Because you put material out on the curb or near your back alley for a collector to pick up, and we have to protect those guys.
Yes.
And so one thing we'd like is for you to use the right garbage can. It's a small can, smaller than 100 liters.
Okay.
There's a kind of garbage can that's
So
bigger
they don't
than that.
break their back
So
while
they don't
picking
break
it
their
up.
back. Sure, exactly. And you should keep everything lighter, so nothing should be heavier than 20 kilograms. Otherwise, it's too heavy for them to pick up on a daily basis. And let's say you have a broken mirror, for example, and lots of very sharp things that can poke him and hurt him. We ask you to put those into a small cardboard box and label it saying sharp objects, so he knows what he's picking
When
up.
he's picking up,
Keep
he's
him
keeping
safe.
himself safe.
That's right. And then when it gets down to the plant, they have lots of occupational health and safety rules that apply to them. So they wear leather gloves, and they wear, you know, face protection where required, and hard hats when required, and dust masks when required, and so on. So we want to keep them safe in that sense as well.
So let's quickly discuss the roles and responsibilities of the citizens. I mean,
Sure.
partly you mentioned that, you know, we should put the garbage in the proper place and keep it light and don't put the sharp objects there. What other responsibilities do citizens have? What do we need to do to make your and our life easy?
Well, first off, we encourage them to recycle what they can, but only recycle the stuff that we ask for. Don't put anything into your blue bag or blue bin that we don't ask for. Make sure you look at the list of the stuff we want. That's one thing. And always take stuff like hazardous waste, like chemicals and pesticides and stuff that you're not using, and e-waste, like your old television set. Always take that to an eco station. That's the responsible thing to do. And when you set out your waste, make sure you keep it nice and light and package it properly so that the man can pick it up responsibly, safely.
So what advice would you like to give to the citizens about recycling, and how can they be part of this green initiative other than any of these that you just mentioned?
I think I would just like to say that they should use the recycling programs that we have in place for them.
Wherever they live.
Pardon me?
Wherever they live, because this program is being watched all over the world. So, so
Or wherever they live,
sh-
that's
they
right,
should be using
exactly.
it.
Because that's the right thing to do. Recycle as much as you can, or you can try and reduce your waste as much as you can as well. That's a good thing for the environment. Those are the main things I'd like to say.
Thank you very much, Gary. You heard from Gary all about waste management and all the efforts that go into all of this program, about managing it, about collecting your garbage, about reducing it to compost or any other form that we can reuse. It's a huge process, costs a lot of money, but at the end it keeps us safe, it keeps our environment healthy. So let's all promise to ourselves that we will try to reduce our waste and we'll try to use those facilities, what they are built for, and take full benefit of that. Please take care of yourself. We'll see you inshallah in another program. Allah Hafiz.